Hello and welcome to Walk the Talk. I am Shekhar Gupta and my guest today, by far the most eminent and the most doughty human rights campaigner from this subcontinent. I know you don't belong only to this subcontinent anymore, you are a global citizen, but you are by far the most courageous and I would say in some ways the most successful human rights campaigner from the region.
You're being very kind, but I should say I'm a daughter of this region and therefore it's always a pleasure to be back here.
So, Irene Khan, now Director General of IDLO, you try and make more and more countries law-abiding and follow international law and to basic principles of law. What brings you to India?
What brings me to India is actually...
What offense have we given you lately?
No, it's not actually offense, it's actually opportunity that brings me to India. India is the world's largest democracy. It has a long, proud tradition of rule of law, of an independent judiciary, and there is a lot that India has to offer to the rest of the world in terms of its own legal experience, its own judicial experience, its constitutional protections. I mean, these are issues that are at stake around the world, everywhere, in every region, in every country. And what I hope India will do will offer its experience and expertise to others, to learn, to watch, and for India also to play a role on the global stage on issues like rule of law, human rights and justice.
So what's your advice to government of India now?
My advice to the government was, you have a lot of experience, expertise, there is a tradition of humanitarianism, apply it.
And don't be afraid.
And don't be afraid.
Because if you see debate in India, particularly on some of our what I call as commando comic channels, it's as if we are now being invaded by some 13th century thug from some place in Central Asia.
Well, there will always be people who will try to provoke things, who will get excited about it and so on. The government's role is to be rational, is to be calm, is to look at systems and procedures and apply them. In fact, that's the business in which I am. You know, in my organization, that's what we are teaching governments, strengthening their capacity to deal with issues in a rational way through the rule of law.
So, your native country, Bangladesh,
yes.
They have accepted a lot of Rohingyas, 4.5 lakhs, 500,000.
Yes.
Now for a country which otherwise doesn't have a glowing record on being liberal or on human rights, where between the radical Islamic groups and the government, it's the secular bloggers who are getting slaughtered. How do we reconcile the two? Why is, first of all, do you appreciate the point that your government is doing it? Second, why are they doing it? And third, then why don't we see the same big-heartedness with democracy and democratic systems within your country?
Well, you know, in my country, there is a small group, and I deliberately emphasize the small group, who have become extreme in their thinking. Intolerant of others, intolerant of other religions. You mentioned bloggers, but it's not just bloggers. Religious minorities, Hindu priests, Christian priests have also been attacked. So there is this small group of intolerant people who are...
I mean, when tourists, expats.
Yes, expats.
As in that restaurant.
And you know, in the history of this organization, of my country, in the history of my country, we have never had attacks on foreigners. Bangladesh, since it was born, yes, there might have been arguments internally, political violence between political parties, but not with foreigners. For the first time, we had that attack. And that attack in that restaurant in Dhaka was horrible. And there was one young Bengali boy whose family I know well, who, Bangladeshi, Muslim, they asked him to leave and he said no. He had come into that building with one young Indian woman and one young American woman, and he said, I'm not leaving my friends behind. Yeah. They killed him. And he stood up for it. And there is a strong movement in Bangladesh in favor of that boy, for us. And everyone is saying, you know,
so he's a hero.
He's the hero. He's the one we admire. He's the one who reflects the values of...
So why is the government not reflecting some of those values internally? The government's very tough on the media. It's very tough on NGOs who want to do something. Anything political in your country?
You see, I think in democracies, governments work well when there is a functioning opposition. and when there is a system of accountability. In Bangladesh, unfortunately, we have never really developed that system of democracy where you have 2, 3, 4 political parties arguing things through.
Hasina has destroyed the opposition now.
Well, the opposition, to some extent, has also destroyed itself.
As it keeps doing here.
Yeah. Whatever happens, you don't have an opposition. And so you have one party basically in parliament. You don't have debates in parliament. You don't have any space for tolerance. And then you become, the government becomes more and more, I would say, restrictive of any other opinion, any kind of criticism. I wouldn't say the entire government. There are still people in the government who are listening and who ought to actually influence the others to say that democracy becomes healthier. The country, it's better for the country to have dissent, to have criticism. It doesn't hurt. It's much better to talk and debate these things, because if you don't debate them, then you will get violence.
Yeah, but the same country then gives refuge to so many Rohingyas that many I see on social media, and I see influential people saying, take away Aung San Suu Kyi's Nobel and give it to Hasina.
Well, Bangladesh, you know, they received, I told you in the 90s, I was on the border. At that time, they received 350,000, 3.5 lakhs. Now they have over 4 lakhs. Bangladesh has actually been very generous to these. And you know what happened in this particular case? The government, the central government in Dhaka, had told the border officials, the security, police and so on, to block people coming over. Because for them, the government sees this as Myanmar pushing people out. Myanmar should not push people out. It was the border officials who said, we cannot push back women, children, injured people, old people. They need help. We'll open it up. So that's sort of the inner generosity of people. They opened it, and these people are coming in. I think the really important issue here is Myanmar. Whenever there is a refugee problem, of course, the focus is on people coming out, but the solution for the problem lies inside the country. And I think countries like India, like others who have influence on Myanmar, should get together and get Myanmar to accept people back.
That's a violent region. Much before you joined Amnesty also, in 86, 87, I carried out a research project for Amnesty on Chakmas who were similarly being driven out of Chittagong Hill Tracts by Bangladesh forces and by Islamic groups at that point. So this is a movie, this is a tragic movie that Bangladeshis have seen before. I mean, from a different end.
That's true. That's true. You know, this is about diversity.
Then it was Muslims killing Buddhists, now it's Buddhists killing Muslims.
You know, you come back to the same issue of how do you build tolerance?
Yeah, two spurs of the same mountain, metaphorically.
Exactly, and how do you build tolerance? This sort of intolerant idea that, you know, I'm right and everyone else has to be wrong, so I've got to dominate them or I have to kill them. That theory, and I think leaders like Aung San Suu Kyi are very well placed to stand up and say, no, that's not the way to behave.
But why is she not doing it?
I think in her own country, she is squeezed because of the political system into which, political arrangement into which she has found herself, where really, yes, she is the nominal, she's the head without the title. And then she has all these arrangements about with the generals and others, and that makes it extremely difficult for her to move. Now, as a person, as an individual, of course, she can take a stand, and I hope she will take a stand. I believe recently she has said that she would like to respect the recommendations that have come from the Kofi Annan Commission, and I think that is the right path to go. Because at the end of the day, you have several 100,000 people inside your country. Maybe they do not belong to the main ethnic group, but as a democratic leader, you have to respect the rights of all.
So where are you on this Nobel debate? Take away Aung San Suu Kyi's Nobel. It's a rhetoric, but still.
She's not the first Nobel Prize winner against whom people have said that.
Right.
People said that for Obama when he went back into war again. I don't think prizes can be given and taken away that easily.
Right.
I think public opinion has made themselves felt strongly. That's a big message, John.
But is she coming up to the honor of the Nobel?
You know, if you look at all the people who have received the Nobel Prize, Peace Prize, I'm sure you will find some people that should not have got the prize. So there will be differences of opinion. And that's why I would think that the fact that people have called for it is strong enough message to her. To her, yes.
And on Hasina, now Hasina has risen as this great, big-hearted, generous, liberal South Asian leader who's welcoming refugees with open arms, in spite of having such serious problems in our own country?
Well, you know, Bangladesh is also like India. Bangladesh is a country of very sharp contrasts. On the one hand, Bangladesh, in terms of its social development indicators, has done extremely well.
Much better than India in many areas.
Yes, Hasina's government has improved education, health, people's access to water and sanitation, women's access to employment and empowerment and so on. So there are some very, very good stories to tell. At the same time, we have stories where newspaper editors are being hounded, bloggers are being killed, not necessarily by the government, but certainly the government is the one that we will look to protect them.
Right.
So in terms of protection, they are falling short. So there are all this other side of it. And I think these are all signs of a democracy that still has to mature.
How strong a factor is Islamophobia now? In non-Islamic countries?
Globally?
Globally.
Yes. You know,
globally, and then I will talk about India.
You know, I will say not just now. When I became Secretary General of Amnesty International, the first press release that went out said I was the first Muslim. I was the first woman, but the first Muslim to become the Secretary General of Amnesty. And when I saw it myself, coming out of Amnesty, I was shocked because I had never thought of myself as a Muslim. You know, I'm a secular Muslim. Yes, we all have our religion, but we don't wear it on our heads. But people picked that up. Whenever I went into interviews with journalists and others.
I'm an atheist until anybody I really care for falls sick, or until India is playing in a competitive sporting tournament.
Yes, of course. We all have our cricket teams and our soccer teams.
And any other team. So
exactly.
Then I believe in whichever God I can think of.
Absolutely, absolutely. Right. No, but you see, there is something that has happened where people have become scared of Muslims, Islam, you know, scared. And that is very bad. You know, that's very bad. There was a time, and there still is, there's also anti-Semitism. So religion as a factor is an emotive factor, you know, because it's not about being rational. It's an emotional thing. We believe in it or we don't believe in it. We get passionate about it. And then everyone else is seen differently. So I think there is a time for much more of what I would call humanism to come forward. And leaders have a big role to play in this.